following is not an episode of Nerds Drink Whiskey. It is, however, a crossover special with our good friends at Fuel Your Fandom. Please go support this wonderful podcast as you have supported our podcast.
All right. Welcome to a special episode of Fuel Your Fandom podcast. My name is Saint. Today I'm working with the Nerds Drink Whiskey crew. We've just filmed a couple episodes of their video podcast that they run on YouTube, yeah?
Yep. Well, we are on YouTube, we are on iTunes, we are on Spotify, and of course people can go to nerdsdrinkwhiskey.com to grab either one of those if they're one of those evil people that don't want to subscribe.
Oh, yeah, But so we just filmed a couple episodes doing their show, and so now they've all graciously agreed to sit in and do an episode of my podcast. So, again, you can find us on anchor.fm /Fuel Your Fandom. Also, if you want a list of all the other places we're available, you can go to facebook.com /Fuel Your Fandom. The list is up there. So, I want to introduce our guests, and usually what I like to do at the beginning of every episode is just kind of dig in a little bit and find out what you're nerdy about, what your fandom revolves around. And in this case, of course, we know whiskey. But what kind of pop culture kind of fandom are you into? So we got Mark, and we got Jeff, and we got Gabe. So, Mark, why don't you give us a little taste of what are you into?
Well, first off, whiskey? I'm really into people who actually get up to their mics, which I noticed that I kept having to remind you when you were recording our episodes, but now that we're recording his podcast, now he's getting right up to the mic so he gets a good audio level. I love that.
Well, that's because I didn't start my recorder, and now we're all going on your audio, so I have to trust your microphones.
Yeah. So the things that I'm into, I really love Firefly. Really love Star Wars, of course, from when I was just a little kid. I'm really getting into right now. Currently, my favorite things to stream are Mandalorian,
I love that.
The Watchmen, and I've been trying to go through Clone Wars now that I have access to all the episodes, all the seasons right up front. Now I'm trying to kind of binge those all at once and kind of get a better perspective, wrap my head around the whole thing a little better. And I also really love shows that you have to have something, some wires crossed or frayed, severed, maybe.
You mean like Happy?
Like Happy.
I was going to ask you.
I love
what you were talking about.
Happy. If Die Hard can be a Christmas movie, Happy is absolutely 100% a Christmas show. So,
well, that is totally a Christmas show.
That is totally a Christmas show. Happy.
I've been meaning to pick that one up. That's Chris Milioni.
Yeah, and it's really it's so if there's things wrong with you, highly recommend it.
A flying blue unicorn, come on.
Is that who Patton Oswalt is?
I pooped.
Yeah.
So there's that. I love Happy. I love Deadwood, Oz. Basically shows like that. Shows that no matter how much I convince my wife, no, they're sweet and innocent, she will not be in the same room when I watch them. But and I just want to say the most, and I want to see a debate on this, wherever you're listening or watching this, discuss this now. The most messed up episode of Oz was the episode called Variety. Those characters should never be singing those songs. That is so messed up. I don't care about the rapes, the killings, the disembowelments, the murders. No.
It's the musical episode.
The musical episode is what really messed with my head. That was really wrong. That even gave me some nightmares. So, but that's the kind of things that I'm into. I really like podcasting. I really like people who I don't know about anybody else here on the panel, but I was never picked for anything, whether it was PE class or otherwise. I've learned that if you have something you're excited about, you need to pretty much lead. And all of my leadership skills have been earned by basically leading because I knew I would never be picked. So
I'm absolutely right
yeah,
there with you on
yeah,
that.
it's so I've never been picked for anything. If I wanted to be part of something, I had to start it and I had to do it, and so that's what Nerds Drink Whiskey is about. And I love the fact that we can now control our own media and create our own media, and we don't need any of the gatekeepers. So that's
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, Jeff, how about you?
I'll go a little broader than Mark did. Just pretty much anything sci-fi or fantasy. I've been consuming that kind of style of thing since I was able to read, I guess you would say.
Yeah, me too.
Growing up, I would never go anywhere without a book.
Now you don't have to. It's on your phone.
Yeah, well, I still go nowhere without a book. It's
Right.
just it's the book in my pocket is also lots of other things.
Exactly.
So yeah, I'm never without a book.
What an age we live in.
Yeah, so been playing computer games, tabletop RPGs, and the like since I built my own computer in 6th grade.
Nice.
Doing all that kind of stuff. Same. A lot of things that Mark said. I don't watch as much television anymore. I would rather be a part of the creative process.
Nice.
So, as in either playing a video game where you get to interact with the world, or tabletop RPG where it's you and a bunch of friends with a framework that you build your own story. Doesn't mean I don't watch stuff. It's just I'd rather watch a couple of things and then I'd mix it up a little more. Less, as far as that, I like going researching, or reading about all sorts of nerdy things. Magazine articles on latest scientific developments and solar panels and lots of if it's interesting, I'll read about it. So
nice.
Trying to think if there's anything that I'm more nerdy about than anything else, but we can all talk Star Wars for hours and all that kind of stuff.
And literally have.
Yeah, I'm sure we all have. Yes, but
one of my last couple episodes was about Star Trek, and I think it goes for an hour and 45, almost 2 hours long.
Well, and that was you just talking about one thing about it.
Yeah, just one branch. Just like who
branch.
would be the best in each particular crew at what job.
I think I still have somewhere my nitpicker's guide to Star Trek, and there's actually a different volume for each. So I have the TNG and the original nitpicker's guides.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I used to love, one of my favorite books growing up was the technical manuals.
Oh,
The Star Trek technical manuals. I had both the one for the original series and for the next gen, and I just loved getting to dive that deeply into just the nerdiness of it.
Well, and I love that there's so many, a number of our real life things that we have today.
Technological advances.
Because they did it on the show before we could do it in real life, and so someone watched the show and said, "Oh, we might be able to actually do that." The reason we have, the reason we started having audio files on the computer was because somebody watched an episode of Data listening to music on asking, they would ask the computer, play Mozart, and they're like, "Oh, we might be able to do that." And that was where the first audio files on the computer were created, based on someone watching the Next Generation.
We're bordering on replicator technology now with the 3D printing, and people are 3D printing food out of protein.
Yeah.
It's going to be amazing. I can't wait.
And I just read an article recently in the paper where they had computers that were basically discussing and planning and strategizing a plan. And so this has happened. The robot takeover has actually been done within a sandbox, thankfully. But all those sci-fi movies where the robots take over, they have the technology, and they've proven that robots can totally do that.
Skynet is real.
Oh,
Skynet is real.
That's all we need.
Cyberdyne Systems Model 101.
Well, that brings us to you, Gabe. What are you nerdy about?
I'm a little different than these guys. I mean,
You're a lot
Really?
different. They're a little
We
different
didn't
than a
notice.
lot of guys.
Well, when it comes down to me, I look more towards the dark side of just about everything. When it comes to comic books, when it comes to my choice between Marvel and DC, I always go with the darker side. I also go with a very, very big affinity for horror movies.
Okay.
I can honestly say, for example, I would personally say that my favorite character's got to be the most infamous cinematic maniac since Darth Vader, and that happens to be Freddy Krueger. That guy is one hell of a villain, and yet in some ways you always find a way to want to cheer for him, at least to get something better or one up on somebody else.
I don't think I've ever cheered for him. It's more of it been like, oh, shit.
When it comes between him and Jason Voorhees and Freddy versus Jason, I wanted Jason
the
annihilated.
fan service movie.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That was fan service to me. It was
Absolutely.
because that came straight out of the comic books. That was because they also had Freddy versus Jason versus Ash.
I think I saw something about that.
Yeah, they wanted to do that.
I want Ash to
originally.
win, but
Oh yeah,
Ash isn't going to win.
But
No.
that and horror movies, a lot of really gory comic books and stuff like that, and then a lot of good video games. Predominantly Xbox One, at least myself. But I will admit that PlayStation's got the edge on exclusives. But
That's why I collect all of them. Then I
Yeah.
don't have to pick.
if I could actually afford both, I would. But
Well, some would say I can't afford it either, but I do it anyways. That's what happened when I quit smoking. Is I ended up collecting a lot of consoles instead.
Yeah,
And-
that's probably a much healthier.
It
idea.
is, and my wife gets. She's very tolerant, my wife, and she takes a lot of that in stride because she knows this is instead of, and so she's a little. I mean, I wouldn't say she's 100% accepting of it just yet, but
No.
she's definitely a lot more accepting of it than I would normally think she would have been.
Well, I
But,
can assume so. Well, mine's going to be the same way, pretty much. She's going to just have to accept it at some
These are
point.
just this part and parcel of what I am. But that actually does tie in really, really well to what kind of I wanted the topic of today's episode to be about was the villain. In a lot of pop culture and science fiction and comic book and video game, there's this TV. I mean, it's freaking everywhere. It's endemic everywhere. We end up with not just anti-heroes like Deadpool and whoever else, but we end up with straight villains that people end up rallying behind and rooting for and deeply understanding and relating to. And I kind of want to talk a little bit about the nature of villainy, why it is that we gravitate towards these characters who are so utterly unlikable as a whole. I mean, if you stopped and looked at it as a whole, they would be completely unlikable. But yet there's something about these characters that draws us in, that brings us on the ride. And a couple of examples I wanted to use, and I was talking to Gabe about this earlier, is my daughter, she's 8 years old now, but when she was like 6, we bought her a Darth Vader sweatshirt. The Darth Vader sweatshirt just looks like the Darth Vader outfit, the buttons and the hood and all that. And what I didn't think about at that point, what actually brought me into this thought of line of thinking was, dude's a giant murdering space Nazi. I mean, when it's all told, he worked for the Empire. He slaughtered people in the Empire's names. The Empire is strongly xenophobic. He murdered children.
Yep.
With the very lightsaber that Rey now fights the dark side with. He murdered children. And so, but you can get a coffee mug with Darth Vader on it. You can get a t-shirt or a sweatshirt or a plushie Darth Vader or toys. And people are just pretending to be running around with a red lightsaber pretending they're Darth Vader. It's like,
Oh yeah, you can find all the dark side lightsabers and all that stuff in Walmart, just like you can everything on the light side.
Big giant store displays that are just, I wouldn't say idolizing. Idolizing is the wrong word, but definitely glorifying this character. When if we had this character in real life, there's no redeeming that. He's like Pol Pot in space.
Well,
he's like Space Hitler. I mean, he's
There's
eliminating.
a lot of, so I think one of the big distinctions people are able to make is, consciously or not, is when it's someone on screen versus someone in real life. If I was ever actually to meet Darth Vader, yeah, you'd be pissing your pants and
terrified.
You're right. Yeah, he's
because he would force choke you rather than talk to you.
Right. There's no way. Yeah, or even like minor like what was I saying? The guy from The Office, the boss,
Michael Scott.
Right, Michael Scott. People like love him as a character. Would hate to have him as an actual
he would
boss.
be the worst
boss. But people love him on the show, so people can look at it from the outside and yeah. So there's a distinction between in real life, everyday interaction with people. Yeah, if you actually even if you ran into someone who acted like Darth Vader, didn't without any of the Force and stuff. Yeah, not someone you'd ever actually want to know on a real life, versus what they do on the screen. As far as why on the screen, that's another thing. We can continue the discussion down there, but I think you have to draw the line of. If
There definitely has to be a separation between real life and
right.
fantasy.
Yeah. So you can discuss why they're great in fantasy, and they wouldn't be people that you would want anything to do with in if they were actual people. But then, yeah, we can. And I think we discuss why on screen they work so well.
Right. Yeah. Mark, you had something to say?
One of the things I love the band Motorhead, and one thing that Lemmy was cursed with constantly, he kept having to answer up in interviews throughout the existence of Motorhead, his obsession with Nazi memorabilia. And he had to explain in interviews, and he would always explain it as, no, I do not hold Adolf Hitler up as a hero. I do not have a high opinion of Adolf Hitler, but know your enemy. When it comes to strategic warfare, when it comes to some of these real life historical villains, some of them got to where they were for a reason, and if you do not study your history, you're doomed to repeat it. And he says, yes, we need to respect those real life villains, because otherwise, how are we going to prevent them in the future? And maybe it's the fact that we are not respecting those villains for what they did and how they did it. Maybe that's how we end up with new villains in the real world rising up again. And so it's when it comes to villains in the real world, I think we need to not necessarily hold them up. And I think we do that with Darth Vader, with Thanos, with all these other ones. We don't necessarily hold them up in great honor or prestige. I think it's more of a kind of a let's study what makes a villain, so that maybe we can prevent villains, and maybe it's a wow, he pulled off this really, how did he pull that off? That is just so genius. And maybe respecting that the intelligence it took to do that evil thing, so that maybe we can prevent others from doing it as well. So,
and I think that comes along the lines, like Jeff was saying, is being able to separate a fictional character from the realistic character, if you will. Yeah. Because, I mean, I'm not like Lemmy. I probably will never own any Nazi memorabilia. I can't stand,
no, me neither.
Things like that. It's abhorrent to me. Yeah. But I wear a belt buckle with the Imperial logo on it. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's certain aspects of, like Glenn was saying, or Gabe, I'm sorry. I keep saying Glenn. I can edit that out too. But like Gabe was saying, kind of an examination of all things dark side. It kind of, I think, allows us to dwell in that place in our heads as well, without necessarily having to step foot into that arena in real life, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, you get a lot of ideation behind, like, oh, I wish I could in that situation kind of thing. Like, oh, I would, fantasize about having the kind of power that these people have, or having the will that it takes to do these things.
Well, look at Fight Club.
Right. There's times when, I'm never going to do any of the stuff, but there is a part of you that
wishes I could. Yeah, for sure.
Although, like, the best villains are the ones that you completely understand why they're doing the thing they're doing.
And I think that's why they write such compelling anti-heroes and villains for television shows, and they're able to make them a main character, and they're able to make them fleshed out like that. For instance, Tony Soprano. I don't know if you guys watched The Sopranos. I did. I loved The Sopranos. But Tony Soprano is a repulsive human being. Serial cheater, gangster, murderer, extortionist. I mean, you name the crime, he's done it. He's not a good person, but that's not why I like this show. I think the reasons that we like those kind of shows is because we're able to take this character that it would be so utterly repugnant in real life and find the humanity in them. Find the parts of, say, for instance, Tony Soprano that humanize him.
Yeah, he was still a family man. He still was, he was still human.
Yeah, and we get a lot of that in reverse, I think, with Breaking Bad, Walter White. Have you guys watched
I watched
Breaking
the
Bad?
entire series with Breaking Bad.
Okay.
I think we all watched the new
El Camino. Was great. Yeah. The thing with Breaking Bad is we've had such a great juxtaposition between the characters. We had Walter White, who was this nerdy family man science teacher who turned to the dark side as a way to initially support his family and then fell in love with the power and became a horrific human being. And then you have Jesse Pinkman, who starts off as a sleazy little douchebag who you'd be far hard-pressed to like. And over the course of the show, we see Walter White devolve into this monster, Heisenberg. And then we see Jesse Pinkman go the other way. Go from someone that you can just turn your nose down on and detest to someone that you have great empathy for. And especially with the movie El Camino, you get to see that side of him rise back up and become human, as it were.
Well, and that's one of the things that I think makes a good villain. Like, you can have, I think the most boring villains are the ones that are black and white. You know, like the in the old days, the villain would come in dressed all in black, and the hero would be dressed all in white. Right, and so and then but now as that kind of thing has evolved, now you have people. The most interesting villains all have some way that you can argue that they're not necessarily a villain. You can always argue their gray area. Darth Vader turned good in the end. I don't know when you're going to post this episode, but in the Christmas legacy, you have villains like the Grinch, Ebenezer Scrooge. One of my favorites is Krampus, because Krampus never sells out. The Grinch sold out in the end. The Ebenezer Scrooge,
Grinch, all he ever wanted was
love.
Yeah.
But here's the thing: it's like, okay, so that's what makes those villains. The fact that them and Darth Vader and so many others. People like them is that there was still good in them, so that hope of them that they're still good in them makes them interesting. Now with Krampus, what makes him interesting is that you look at him and he goes, well, he's got to be the yin to Santa's yang. You know, Santa goes and gives all the good little boys and girls presents. If Krampus comes to you, basically he takes your children and leaves you a lump of coal, and so it leaves the parents a lump of coal. So okay, he takes away all the bad kids before they turn into evil. So just like the
almost
devil,
a good trade in this economy,
right? Just like the devil himself is the devil evil. The devil isn't necessarily evil. The devil is the one he's just the prison guard. He's the head of the prison for evil. He's the one that keeps evil from escaping. He's the one that protects us from evil firsthand, because he's the one that actually controls evil, imprisons them, and keeps evil away from us. So you could argue that the devil himself is actually good. And so every good villain, you can always argue that they are not a villain, and it's that almost that anti-hero element that makes them so intriguing.
Well,
no, go ahead.
So I wouldn't say all of them. Like, there's plenty of really excellent villains that, from almost any angle, they're a villain, but they, like, well, so we've been talking about, like, the draw of, like, villains that we like. So there's the villains that we really appreciate, there's a fandom for Vader, there's a fandom for Thanos, there's a fandom for, just a bunch of these people that they are the antagonist, they are the bad guy who the heroes are fighting against. Then there's also the villains that are really great villains that nobody likes. I'm trying to think, what's the name of the, on Harry Potter, the one dressed all in pink?
Oh,
yeah, the school teacher.
Dolores Umbridge.
Yes. Nobody likes her.
Oh, she's terrible.
But she's a great villain.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Everyone,
and I don't think anyone's really sitting there going, man, I really admire that about Dolores Umbridge.
I admire how she actually enforces discipline.
Jesus, boy, howdy did she.
There you go. See, any good, interesting villain, you can argue the good in them.
But I think you're absolutely right. I think there is definitely a yin and yang kind of aspect. It's in the same nature of there would be no good without the recognition of evil. We wouldn't know what good is if we didn't know what evil was. Yeah. The same thing. We wouldn't be able to tell what a hero was if we didn't have the opposite to show us what a villain was, to show us what a hero was capable of. And I don't know, have you guys watched The Boys yet? On Amazon?
Is that the one with the superheroes that are really jerks?
Yeah.
Absolute jerk. Yes, I watched that. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
And their lead character in The Boys was a character called Homelander. And Homelander...
Is that the Captain America?
That's the Captain America, Superman kind of amalgam thing that they had. And his whole true justice in the American way, he was such a dick. He was such a dick. And the fact of the matter is it was very much his hero role was very much a persona that he would put on for the cameras, for the people. But once you get to see behind the camera, holy shit, repulsive. Cool. Just and just almost no redeeming qualities whatsoever.
Yeah.
So,
and not having watched, I've heard good things about it. It's on my list.
It's like 10 episodes long.
Right, it's not very long.
45-minute episodes. They're pretty good.
I have such a backlog of shows that I barely have time to watch. But
it's worth it for Carl Urban alone.
Yeah, he looked great in it. Does it do a decent job of showing how power corrupts? Because I assume that well, I mean, like, not
yeah,
that,
it's not, and not even just in the superhero power. It shows the power corruption of corporations as well.
Because I assume that yeah, if we had supervillains, if we had people with superpowers in the real world, yeah, they would be dickbags because
they could be.
Because
and I always tell people the same thing. It's like they're like, "Oh man, wouldn't you be a great Jedi? Wouldn't you really enjoy being a Jedi, having those powers?" I'm like, "No, I would be the worst Jedi," because they say Jedi don't use their power for personal gain. Fuck that. Yeah. If I have the ability to make you think what I want to think, or do the things that I want to do, I'd be horrible.
You'd be technically a Sith, wouldn't
you?
I
would be a Sith.
Yeah. So again, I don't know if this is going to be posted before Christmas.
It'll probably be posted. I got like an episode or two before this.
Okay. So I want to point out who in my opinion, there is one villain that is of Christmas that is more evil than the Grinch, Ebenezer Scrooge, and Krampus all rolled into one.
Say Hans Gruber.
No.
Damn it.
Mariah Carey. Don't we all hate that song? She has made more people hate Christmas music than anyone. My wife points out she was just a puppet, that somebody else wrote that song, but I think it was her execution that made it so horrible.
I swear to God. I still haven't, as of the filming of this, December 7th, we're filming this, taping this. I still have not lost Whamageddon yet. I feel good about that. Do you know what Whamageddon?
Is that where you play two songs against each other?
Mm-mm. Okay. This is where how long can you go working in a retail environment? I work in a retail environment, or out in the general public
without hearing
before
Wham.
You hear Wham's Christmas song, which was Last Christmas. Yeah. And I thought I lost it yesterday, or day before yesterday at work, because they played a version of it, but it wasn't Wham. So I still.
I will listen to that 1,000 times if I never have to hear that Mariah Carey song ever again. I'm telling you.
I'm gonna win that one then, because I work where I work.
You're talking to your microphone.
Oh. So I'm doing it again. Yeah. Anyways, but technically, I'm gonna end up like not running into that song because I hear the same 15 or so songs every single day.
I've heard every iteration of Frosty the Snowman that there is.
Oh,
every iteration of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Now, I want to point out another villain that is also. Some people at times we think of it as the hero, but I think it is also the villain, and that is the collective businesses. That are creating way too much content that we could never actually watch, and I think it's actually they're torturing us because they know, like you guys keep talking about. Yeah, this is on my
TV that we can't have the time
to
see.
This is it's on my list. This is on my list. This is on my list. All these things are on our list to watch, but we are never going to have time to watch it all because they are putting out so much content. It's only there to torture us. They're villains.
Yes, I would say I mean you. There's like the classic villain that is like the succubus. You die of pleasure. Like it's pretty much
that's exactly it.
Yeah. So there is such a thing. It's hedonism kind of. There's It's
I blame the House of Mouse.
Yeah.
I was doing just fine getting caught up on my shows until Disney Plus dropped, and now I'm absolutely
to
screwed.
Be fair,
Am I the only one that doesn't have Disney Plus?
You must be.
Plus.
I mean, I don't give a shit about it. I really don't.
Dude,
I will someday. I will.
Gargoyles.
I will.
Gargoyles.
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 But
Love that.
DuckTales, Darkwing Duck.
Again,
The Mandalorian.
I only have so many hours, and I've seen all those other ones already. I watched them as they aired, so I don't need to go back and rewatch Gargoyles.
So Jeff, you don't have a real huge nostalgia bug in you?
Gargoyles.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate all of those, but I remember enough about them that I don't feel like I have to go back and watch them. I'm not as old as
It
you
triggers
guys.
my member berries.
I found that watching Gargoyles as a 49-year-old male is it's a completely different perspective than when I watched it. What was it, 20, 30 years ago when it came out?
You get more of the references.
There was things that I either didn't get or now my perspective has changed. And the reality of it is that was, many people call it the dark horse of Disney. It was, when it was done, everybody was like, how the heck is this Disney? This is before Pirates of the Caribbean. At that point, everything Disney put out was so squeaky clean. And then they came out with Gargoyles and everybody's going, how is Gargoyles putting out such a dark cartoon?
They're bringing it back.
And there's the main creator behind it is trying to get people to bring it back. I hope if they do bring it back, they embrace it as something for adults as opposed to something for kids, and they write just a really good dark gothic drama, and make it what it, like there's a fan trailer that was made that was absolutely beautifully done, and I hope they do it more like that if they bring it back. But the reality of it is you can never go home again. Anytime you go back to something, it's never what you as a fan want it to be.
Part of my reason I don't is that I don't want to
sully what you already know.
I have good memories of watching that when it aired, and I know it won't be. I tried.
You don't think it'll hold up?
Not that it won't necessarily. Well, it won't hold up, and it'll mean. I don't think I could go back. I can't stand sitcoms anymore.
They're hard to watch a lot of times.
Right, I can't. I grew up watching sitcoms just like everybody, because that was all there was. That was all there was. I will there's a very few select number of sitcoms out there now that I can stomach at all. They just do not.
They pretty much all suck though. That's why
they don't trigger your member
I don't think they
anymore.
Suck any more than the old ones did. That's what I'm saying. Is I think that
they're static quo.
Right, they haven't gotten any better or worse. Whereas the rest of TV has moved on. We now have these great story arcs that it's a whole season to get through the story. It progresses. That there's not this.
I think that's why a large portion of the sitcom watching is coming from places like Hulu and Netflix that are kind of generating their own content now, because I think a large portion of that format is kind of dwindled. And like you say, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing.
I think if they reinvent the wheel, I think that if you do a sitcom, it's going to on TV. Pretty much everything it fits into just a couple of categories. Number one, it's either a medical drama of some sort, a crime drama of some sort, a family sitcom of some sort, or some sort of reality television. Mm-hmm. And it's like everything can pretty much be categorized in a certain specific thing. Now, if you're going to do one of those categories, the only way to really make it interesting to me is you totally just disrespect the genre, and you totally reinvent the wheel. Like if you're going to do a crime drama, like Gregory House, make the protagonist protagonist make
Some
the protagonist
would say antagonist.
Be that's kind of the antagonist. Make it so that there is something a little bit different than just another disease to solve.
So wait, which category is The Mandalorian? Is that real?
That's space western.
Okay, is that family drama? Is that the one? That was one of the ones you said, right?
I think that what they've done is
solidly sci-fi.
I think they've mixed crime drama and family. Because it is a family sitcom, because you got, you could almost put a laugh track to all the cute little things that Baby Yoda or the child does. You can almost put a laugh track to that, and it'd be a family sitcom. You could edit it easily and make it into a crime drama. I think that it rides, it's both a foot in both of those wells.
Right, and I don't think, but the thing is that they don't lean too heavily on one aspect or the other.
Exactly.
It's by and large, it's its own thing. It's like a spaghetti western set in a universe that a lot of people have a great affinity for, that allows itself to be that, but it also allows itself to have moments of levity and little cute bits like the baby Yoda child, little Kevin. There's a meme going around where they call him Kevin because they didn't know what his species was called, so now I just call him Baby Kevin.
You have no argument with that, I'm assuming.
It annoys my daughter to no end, and I love it. But I think you touched on something that I really kind of want to look into, too. We talked about Disney being squeaky clean, but they have a history of producing some of the most villainous villains, if you will, caricature versions of them. But we definitely get a lot of serious villainy out of Disney. And we got your villains that are just straight up evil, like, your Scar. Maleficent. Even now they're trying to do a redemption arc for Maleficent, but I don't really buy it.
And,
Ursula, Captain Hook.
Yeah.
Jafar.
A lot of these are. How much of those are original content? Because a lot of those stories were taken from fairy tale.
Yeah. Almost none.
No. Disney
is not the most original
Disney
creators
will take
ever.
Exactly what they want and do exactly what they want because they've got the money to back it up.
I'm trying to think who.
Please don't
was
cancel
the
my Disney
villain
Plus.
Or like Mickey Mouse. Who was the villain?
Pistol Pete.
Yeah.
Oh.
Was one of his huge antagonists.
Bluto was
Popeye.
Yeah.
Pistol Pete was kind of the same damn thing. Just
well, and you had like Elmer Fudd and Yosemite Sam. I mean, those are Warner Brothers, but still, there has. But you got those cartoon villains. The
thing that was alarming to me, and I had a friend, my friend Carrie, who runs a podcast called Paranormal Pints. He talks about, as far as the villains in Disney films, they tend to go more towards the stereotypes, the gay stereotypes, almost like they're trying to villainize people who are gay, using that as the reason for part of their villainy. Because if you look at it, there's a lot of super flamboyant affectation when they talk. Definitely a lot of things that would lend itself to very stereotypical portrayals of.
Do you have an example you can point to?
Well, look at the way Jeremy Irons talked as Scar. Very over the top, very dramatic. You've got Ursula, who comes across very brassy, like Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, divine, very divine-like in her portrayal, which brings her into the realm of being a stereotype or a trope of the drag community. You've got Captain Hook, very, very foppish, very, very mustache twirly kind of villain. It's almost like they used stereotypes in that regard to kind of villainize them further. And I don't really want to think that Disney did that purposely.
Well, like, I'm trying to think which one obviously as, if someone doesn't know much about drag society,
Mm-hmm.
that's not, a lot of people didn't have any interaction with anybody like that.
Right.
And gay characters on screen weren't that common. So, like, I'm not sure how much of those affectations are intentional or just consequential. Like, I don't know if there's any correlation between. I mean,
it's definitely something to think about.
Right.
But
the being overly dramatic as a villain makes, like, we all think that makes decent sense. I think a drag, someone in who's doing that, they're just trying to distance themselves from a normal person, and then you end up
right. So the
crossing
absence of normal would be what.
Right.
Yeah.
They're just trying to get away from normalcy by, using that affectation.
There's a really funny comedian. His name is James Adomian, who talks about how all of the villain characters in 80s cartoons seem to come across as very much, the gay stereotypes, like Starscream with his lisping, lilting voice, and Cobra Commander being the same actor, obviously has the same issues, but they talk about that a lot. And I think as we had a conversation about representation...
Well, your favorite from is Skeletor.
Skeletor is love.
Yeah, I think my love for Skeletor is actually my love for the meme he just mentioned, which is a female artist took the character Skeletor and just started basically grabbing screenshots from the 80s cartoon and adding motivational speaker things to the graphic. And she started a series called Skeletor is Love. And my fandom for Skeletor is actually my fandom for Skeletor's Love. Skeletor in and of himself, I'm not actually a big fan of, but putting motivational sayings on still shots of Skeletor, I think is the most beautiful, most wonderful thing.
It's a fantastic
it's absolutely beautiful. Yeah, and I love that juxtaposition. So it's my fandom of that is actually for more of the that creation, that series that this female artist did. So, and she stayed hidden for many years, and it wasn't until a few years after she stopped creating new Skeletor's Love memes that she actually outed herself as, hey, actually it's me, and I'm the artist behind it. You can follow my art from here, and you can now find out who the artist behind it is. But she stayed hidden for many, many years, and nobody knew who was behind it. So
what I think is great is, as I came across a video of the guy who voices Skeletor. He was getting ready to go to a con a few years ago, and so he took a time to do a video where he's reading all of these Skeletor's Love memes in the Skeletor voice. And I've got to find you that video and send that to you. It was absolutely fantastic. But I don't mean to think that they do it necessarily to demonize gay culture or representation or anything like that. I think, as you said, it's kind of they were trying to do the opposite of your squeaky clean, normal, cisgender white male thing that we were seeing all the time. And it just might have veered towards that inadvertently. I certainly think now it's drifting away from that further and further, the more representation positive culture. Definitely, I don't think Disney is in the business of isolating its customer base at this point. Yeah. And what it all boils down to is, if you piss off the gays, you're going to lose all that money. They don't want to do that. They're a business. They want as much money as they can get. So.
Like you were saying, like Captain Hook being foppish. Like, there are a lot of guys, maybe they don't admit it, but there are a lot of guys, and it might be something that is looked down upon, but that take a lot of time preening and peacocking, and that they I can.
Mark's preening himself right now.
Yeah, I actually, you did a good job with your beard oil. I don't see any.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see any.
I gotta look pretty for the camera, you know.
Mhm.
And if this ain't pretty, I don't know what is.
So, yeah, I mean, like, yeah, it's usually not a positive trait, so I can see it being used.
I think a large part
of a villain's.
in our community we
repertoire,
tend to villainize anything that's away from, like you say, the norm.
Mhm.
And unfortunately for society, this has been, pop culture in general has been very cis white male driven
right
for
ever.
And we're only just now recently starting to move past it. And I think not only is that going to give us more realistic portrayals of villains and heroes on screen, but it's going to definitely help broaden it out. And, you know, for the same reasons, people are saying, oh, well, I want my little girl to be able to see a positive female stereotype or a female role model.
Mm-hmm.
I want my black son to have a positive black role model to go on to. I want my trans kid to have someone who's trans to look up to. We're going to get both sides of that. And that's fucking exciting for me, because we're going to get to see better character development, both in our heroes and our everyman characters, but in our villains as well.
Mm-hmm.
Once we can finally delve into these characters as people, because I think that's a large part of what we're doing with our Walter Whites, with our Tony Sopranos, with our Dexter Morgans.
Well, and recently what kind of you're saying was what kind of inspired this episode was the latest Joker.
Oh, absolutely. Oh boy, can we talk about the Joker? I think by the time this episode airs, we're past the spoiler moratorium on that.
I would think so.
If you haven't seen it in theaters, you're just...
The Butler
you're
did
missing
it.
the
I'm just going to
fuck
spell it
out,
out right
man.
there. The Butler did it. Okay. Yeah.
But no, if you haven't seen it by now, you're missing the fuck out. This,
It comes out on digital on the 17th
Yeah,
of December. I'm
this
looking forward to
movie-
watching it again.
this movie was great, man. But honestly, I at least to me, I'd say he's like, to me, like in comic book history, he's the most infamous villain in comic book history. At least
I'll
to
agree.
me.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm a huge Batman fan.
Yeah,
by
I
and
grew
large.
up with Batman.
And the Joker is definitely one of the main foils in comic books, and not specifically one version of the Joker. In fact, that's something they're
There are
dealing
three.
with. Yeah, so it's what they're dealing with right now is 3 different Jokers, 3 different origins. But
Now, I believe that from what I got out of this movie is that he is not the Joker. He is the inspiration of like he was the this was to me this movie was the origin story of the origin story. This is the precursor. This was the tiny little flame that started it all. And I thought that for me that was what was so exciting about this is that he wasn't the real Joker, is that he was the one that eventually inspired Joker and inspired the incident, as we saw in that one scene, inspired the incident that created Batman. He was not the actual character. He was the one that inspired all those characters.
Also,
Right.
he was basically the match.
the
He's
lit the
basically
flame.
match
yeah.
that struck the fire.
He was that tiny little flame
got
that
it.
started the fire.
I've heard that theory as well, and I have to say I'm pretty excited to see if they move to that theory, or if they've got a bunch of different directions they can play that with, and it all going to depend on, they're already talking a sequel, because of course
When
if
it made that much
that
money,
much
of course
money,
there's
yeah.
going to be a sequel. Yeah.
But they're not saying whether or not he's going to play into Robert.
And by the way,
Pattinson's-
Motley Crue's never going to tour again.
Yeah, right. And Kiss is retired. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, and if they do tour again, Mick Mars is gonna give away free tickets to everybody.
Yeah, he regrets saying that, I'm sure.
Oh, I'm sure he does.
But the Joker, I think, it was such a beautifully shot movie. I have to think about what I want to say here, and I got to say it very carefully because the movie was very, very beautifully shot. It was very grim. It was very gritty. But it was also very, very real. And that's where the disturbing aspect of this movie comes in, is because in most superhero genre movies, you've got some kind of external event that triggers superpowers. You got the lightning that gives the Flash his speed. You've got a magical totem of some sort. You've got a ring that comes down from the heavens that gives you the ability to control whatever the hell. You're an alien from another species who's got certain powers imbibed upon them or imbued upon them. But there's none of that here. For a DC Comics movie, there were no spandex. There was no superpowers. There was no real connection to any of that. And that's what made it so dark and so horrifying, is because this is just the tale of a psychologically damaged man getting beat down by society to the point where he just utterly snaps.
And has nothing to lose no more.
There's
because
nothing
of
to
it.
lose. Exactly.
And throughout society, we have both in fiction and nonfiction, we've had situations where you had, say, two brothers. One goes through those horrific moments, and it makes them stronger. And the other brother goes through those same exact horrific moments in the exact same way, through almost the exact same age, and he turns into a villain.
Mm-hmm.
He ends up in prison. And so the Joker, people can sit there and hate on it and say, oh, it glorifies this or it doesn't, but the reality of it is that, okay, so you've got this guy who turned left. Maybe another, could we do a story on the guy that turns right? Well, no, because that'd be really boring, but we know
he just goes
that,
to work every day.
But he just goes to work every day and to his 2.5 kids and their dog, and and it's great.
Although I say if you've got
it's
0.5 kids, that's kind of a villainy thing there too.
Well,
He was Tyrion's dad.
Oh,
he was
poor
what?
Tyrion.
Tyrion's father.
Tyrion.
The imp from Game of Thrones.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. So it's
Tywin Lannister. Another good villain.
So you can go through and you can sit there and smack talking about how it was just they're not doing a healthy discussion of mental health and
that's not what it was supposed to be.
But that's not what it was supposed to be, and you got to accept it for what it was and what it was trying to be, and that is a beautiful thing in and of itself. But don't expect everything to be sending exactly the message about a subject that it's not your microphone, so it's not going to say it exactly the way you want it said.
Right, and in fact, I wrote a song about that with my band. I'm still writing a song about that. I call it One Bad Day. And because Joker and the Batman are both flip sides of the same coin. Because one bad day, or a series of bad days, brought the Joker down. Turned the Joker into what the Joker is. One bad day turned Batman into Batman. His parents were killed. That was his one bad day. He could have chosen to reflect on that and become evil. He chose to become a hero. The Joker has his one bad day. He chose to become a villain. It all depends on how you internalize the things that you're facing, the things that you're suffering. And so that was the whole point of the song, was the kind of the yin and yang with the Joker and Batman, how they're both basically the same character. They've just embodied that one bad day a different way. It took like you said, a left instead of a right. So, how are we doing for time? 28 minutes left. Why don't we take a quick pause? We're going to throw a quick commercial interruption in here, and we'll continue talking with the Nerds Drink Whiskey crew here in just a moment. All right, so I'm going to say welcome back. And then, so we talked a lot about the nature of villainy and what makes a good villain. I want to kind of throw it out to you guys here, so it's not just me talking a lot, because I do talk a lot at length, whether anyone wants to hear me or not. But I kind of want to get a feeling on, okay, Mark's got a hand puppet of Ziltoid. Is that his name? Mm-hmm. He doesn't use a microphone either.
Yes, Ziltoid, the omniscient. If there was two omnisciences, I would be both.
Fantastic.
Nice.
So, just kind of give me, who is your favorite villain? If you had to pick a villain that you kind of, I don't want to say relate to. Relate is kind of harsh when you're talking about evil, but who is your go-to villains?
Well, evil is a point of view, first off.
It is. I mean, Star Wars taught me that.
Yep.
Everything's different from a certain point of view.
Absolutely.
Well, in any battle, in any war, depending upon which side of the battlefield you are on, that changes the perspective of who is the villain and who is the hero.
Oh, absolutely.
So I mean, a lot that again makes the villains more interesting.
That's where propaganda comes from.
And of course, if you want to separate it into just the prog metal world, I believe my favorite villain is Ziltoid.
Yes.
I don't think there's a whole lot of villainy in the prog metal world, but Ziltoid might be
does he win by default?
a rock alone. So,
well, I mean, some people would say that in the prog world, that Phil Collins joining Genesis, that Phil Collins was a villain. Would you not agree with that?
I love Phil Collins.
Okay, me too. But
I'd be the worst person to ask. I love Phil Collins.
I'll tell you one thing, though. As good as anyone is, you're always evil in somebody's story.
Absolutely. And I think that's a large part of what The Boys plays on, is depending upon which side of the coin you're looking at is kind of what you're looking for. And you're only ever going to see the good in yourself, so you don't maybe necessarily see yourself as the villain.
Yeah.
Even when, I mean, the trains always ran on time. Stalin never saw himself as a villain. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't, but a lot of Russians didn't see him as a villain. Right, because he made things work. Yeah. He made the industry work. He did it with slave labor and a whole lot of horrible shit.
Well, and
but, I mean,
you know what the funny thing is, along with that, is that in essence, that kind of reminds me, that whole thing is that you, as good as you're trying to do for some things, you end up becoming kind of a villain in some respects anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Is if you, I remember a quote from The Dark Knight that Harvey Dent said right towards the end. He's like, well, actually, no, he said it very towards the beginning. You either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
That's absolutely right. Mm-hmm. And that's right up there with, absolute power corrupting absolutely.
Yeah.
I think is everyone has that potential to be the left turn instead of the right turn. I really like that analogy. But
two sides of the same coin. That was
right.
That's one of the reasons why Two-Face was such an interesting character, as one of the villains in the Batman Arkhamverse anyways. But
his was more just chance than anything else. You always had a chance with Two-Face.
That's very true, but I just always thought it was interesting that it was two sides of the same coin, because of the fact that it can go either way, and if it goes the dark way, it goes very, very dark.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So here is a perspective that most people don't know. Is I added, for those watching on video, I added to the table Salacious Crumb, and one of the things that makes me love out of Star Wars, out of all the side characters of Star Wars, Salacious Crumb is my favorite. Mm-hmm. And the reason is everybody colors him as a villain. Everybody thinks he's a villain, but that is the wrong assumption.
No,
because
he's villain adjacent.
Well, he is villain adjacent, but more importantly, he is actually the victim, because Salacious Crumb is actually a slave, is a prisoner of Jabba the Hutt, who is under penalty of death required to make Jabba laugh every day. If he does not make Jabba laugh, if one day passes where he does not make Jabba the Hutt laugh, he gets eaten. That was their deal. That is his threat, his doom of Damocles. And so when he died on that barge, it was not he died a victim. He died a prisoner. And so most people think of him as a villain when really he is a victim. And how often do we paint in real life, how often do we paint somebody a villain when they're actually the victim? And so it's the character of Salacious Crumb gives you a lot of food for thought, and I find that I resonate with Salacious Crumb more than so many other characters, even outside of Star Wars, because how many of us live every day where we have to, where keeping a sense of humor is life and death. And for him, it was literal. But for us, it's maybe a figurative thing. But how many of us live every day where keeping that sense of humor is
the chances
vital.
that any of us have the means and freedom to do to be outside of having to do something for somebody else in order to gain whatever we need. We all go to work. We all trade our our livelihood for
the ability to
do. Yeah. So we're all in the same situation. Obviously not to the same extreme, but yeah, how many people can say that they have no requirements upon them by somebody else in order to get what they need to survive? So we all are in that situation to one degree or another.
And I don't think I ever really demonized Salacious Crumb. I always just kind of figured him as a pet. Maybe not necessarily as a slave, but I was just kind of assumed he was a pet. And I didn't ascribe sentience really to.
He basically was kind of a Dennis the Menace, who escaped from the Kowakian monkey lizard planet, and he was basically just looking for food and just trying to survive. But he's maybe a little bit of a prankster, but nothing with immoral intent. Nothing with. He wasn't really trying to do anybody harm. He was just kind of a little bit of a practical joker, little bit of which we all got from his laugh. But he really didn't want to do any harm to anybody. He just wanted to. He was just a little bit of a prankster. That a little bit of a Dennis the Menace, was out looking for a good time, and he needed to survive, so he needed to eat, and it was trying to survive as this little prankster that kind of got him ended up imprisoned by Jabba the Hutt. So yeah, it's
well, that gives an interesting spin to a character I really wouldn't have given too much of a thought about. So
yeah, and I think that's true of any good, interesting villain. Is there's always if you do a deep dive on them, if they have room enough, if they have depth enough depth of character for you to find out perspectives that you maybe didn't know otherwise, that's what makes those characters so interesting. If Thanos was just plain evil, I don't think he would be that interesting. But the reality of it is, he has enough depth of character to where there are people that say Thanos did nothing wrong, that Thanos had good motives for doing what he did. And so there's the old cliche, let us do evil so that good may come. It's when are it's that dichotomy, I think is the right word, of are you the hero or are you the villain? And if there isn't that question, I don't think you make a good hero or a good villain.
Interesting.
So do we want to wrap up with our favorite villains?
Yeah, let's do that.
Gabe, why don't you start?
Me personally, I mentioned it right at the beginning of this particular podcast. It's probably got to be Freddy Krueger. He came out when I was just a kid. I was just an infant at the time. I got into him a few years later, right around Nightmare 3. Really good writing by Wes Craven, at least, on the first one. And then on the third one, the second one was really weird. I mean,
they do have a tendency to drift towards the weird.
Yeah, well, especially in the later series. But I've always been a really big fan of Freddy Krueger. He always has the snappy one-liners where you got Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, all these other guys.
Silent killers.
Yeah, they don't say anything at all. And then they're just stabbing victims and the body count rises. I mean, I understand how people like that for the gore factor, but I like creative kills. I want something that's going to be a little more memorable in that department.
Yeah, absolutely.
You see that maybe once, maybe twice with Jason Voorhees or Michael Myers, where they're stuck in the wall or some shit like that, or the body bag 1 in 7. But when it comes to the actual memorable kills, a perfect one that comes to mind for me was Nightmare 3, when he actually pops up and he's the television set and says, "Welcome to prime time, bitch," before he rams her head through the TV. That was original. That was a wonderful, snappy one-liner. You see everybody else, including Chucky and everything else after that, trying to say smart
Trying to be
ass
pithy
bullshit.
and yeah.
Trying to have some little quip to have before they stab you. It always happened that way after Nightmare.
I think you're right. I think Freddy was kind of the originator of the one-liner killer.
Kinda, yeah. I was a big fan of his. I mean, everything else seems kind of secondary if you have something to say before you're going to kill somebody in those movies.
Who the hell are you doing it for? You're doing it for yourself, because the person you're saying it to is going to die anyway. So.
Exactly. Although at the same time, there's a direct homage if you think about it. The other main one where they're making fun of it in the movie Scream was also directed by Wes Craven as well. So that made a lot of sense in that regard.
Wes Craven was able to send up a lot of his own stuff doing the Scream movies.
Oh, yeah.
But then I think they also gave a really good homage to Freddy Krueger with Scary Terry on Rick and Morty.
Oh, that's true.
I love the character. I think it's great.
That was funny as hell. Well, they've also did the thing on South Park where they had him go into the dream of Stan.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, no, excuse me. It was of Mr. Mackey, I think.
I don't recall, but
it was a weird episode of South Park. They had Matt Hasselbeck on there. They had Freddy Krueger. They had a couple other stupid characters all trying to go into a dream to save somebody. It was really stupid, but it was hilarious.
What about you, Jeff? Who's your favorite go-to?
I'm gonna go biblical on this. I like Satan.
Okay.
I mean, because he has been around for so long and there's so many different ways of interpreting the character, you can find a bunch of great modern, I would so that he's done really well as far as someone that you can empathize with and see why they did, I feel, cast out of heaven because they weren't willing to just toe the line. Is kind of how
right.
And yeah, if you are given absolute law, I would totally react in the same way. And then he's able to carve his own kingdom, out. And like Mark said, it's all a perspective. Is that he's fighting for these souls to control them, but again, is he keeping them from corrupting other places and stuff? But mostly it's like the fact that they're so open to interpretation and that there's so many different ways of portraying the same character. You get a lot of other villains that this one way, the way that we've seen them is better than is great, but that's canon. That's now the only thing you're ever going to know about them.
Right.
If you don't have because Satan's essentially public domain, anyone can take him and think of ways of showing interpreting. So the fact that he's so malleable and so kind of universal is that means you can play with him a lot more than you can other villains that are the property of whoever thought of them.
Right. And I think we're seeing Lucifer, Satan, right. Morningstar. We're seeing him become more of a fictionalized character.
Exactly.
Mediums on TV and things like that. We're getting to see a lot more of the other side of the story, I guess.
There's a lot of...
It's all fictional.
Right.
But I mean, at the same time, we're getting to see...
The Bible's all fictional, so, it's like...
That's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah.
But we're getting to see a lot more portrayal.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not, red horns, pitchfork.
Yeah, we're getting away from Paradise Lost. Like, we're getting away from the classic,
Dante's Inferno type thing. And
kind of stuff.
And we get a lot of things like Lucifer is a big popular show on TV. We also get shows like Preacher addresses it a lot.
Well, or Al Pacino was...
Oh, yeah, Devil's Advocate.
Yeah, that was a great movie.
That was a great movie.
He was great in that. So it's...
You're totally killing my answer.
What's your... Okay, go.
Sorry.
What's your answer, Mark?
I thought of this answer before he thought of his. So I thought that's why, when he said Satan, I was looking at him like, you jerk.
I thought about it before I asked Gabe.
Yeah, and so I want to preface this by saying you can at me because I'm going to stir the pot a little bit. Mark Karras on Twitter. Markcarras. And of course, you can probably guess what my answer is going to be. My favorite villain, the Lord thy God.
I was just saying. I was just going to say God.
And again, and look at Al Pacino's description of God in The Devil's Advocate. Look at when he talks about he says, look, but don't touch. Taste, don't swallow. And he's always playing this. It seems like it's always this game. It's this. Sure, I'm going to allow. This devil character. I'm going to allow him, but to torture you and to put you through literal and figurative hell. I love you. And so
and as long as you love me too, everything will be just ducky.
Right, and if you watch the show Supernatural, I think that show's season finale. Dude, I have no idea how the writers are going to get out of that for that final season. It's either going to really suck or be really good. But what they did to the character of God in that show, and then ended it with Motorhead's "God was never on your side," was so friggin' brilliant. I think the people behind that needed some kind of a medal. The God to me is always, and as a former very passionate Christian, excommunicated, everything. That's God is from a very early, decades ago. God has always been my favorite villain.
Yeah, I mean the whole thought that you spend your life appeasing this immortal being that doesn't actually tell you the rules, and you have to do everything perfectly, or you spend eternity suffering for it.
But I love you.
Right. But I'm the fact that it's all knowing, all loving, omniscient. It's like either you have free will, but it's all knowing. So it could, if it's omniscient and all knowing, you don't have free will.
As Al Pacino said, he's an absentee landlord.
Right. I agree that God is a great villain. I like looking. I think Satan's a more fun villain.
Absolutely.
That's my. I pick Satan because that's the one that I like.
He is the much more frightening villain. And let's face it, is there any creature in either in fiction or whether you believe they're real or fiction, is there any creature that is more frightening, more absolutely nightmare-inducing than an angel?
And I think that's what I like about stories like...
I was named after an angel.
Gabriel. So. Yeah. I think that's what I really like about the Superman mythos in and of itself is yes, this is an alien come from space with the powers of a god, and we're lucky he's on our side, and they've taken a lot of liberties with characters like Homelander and the Boys, and there's a couple of different... the Plutonian, I think, was in another comic strip or comic book.
Did you ever see there was the comic Red Sun?
Red Sun,
where he landed, the alternate universe where he landed in Russia.
And that's just it. It's like, yes, we say Superman is the way, the truth, and the light, just like God is. He's got the powers of a god. Mm-hmm. He's here to save us, unless he's not.
Yeah.
And those are always the fun stories to see, is the juxtaposition of this hero taken to the other extreme, where he is the ultimate evil. I mean, and there's no one more terrifying than, look at the Injustice comic book series going around, based on the video game. And I'm going to talk about this. We're running a little bit out of time here, but the Injustice comic series basically took Superman, inadvertently killed his wife and unborn child because of the machinations of the Joker. He punched the Joker's heart through his chest, killed him, obviously, and took on the totalitarian regime aspect of his character. He became all-controlling, because if there's something that is going wrong in the world and I can't control it, it ain't going to happen. And so he became this horrific evil.
Well,
and it's fantastic to look at, because it gives you the flip side of this normally, white bread Cub Scout character.
I don't know enough about the people of Krypton. But you give Superman a bunch of these powers, it's not inconceivable that he's going to live for a really long time. What happens after 100 years of people worshiping and idolizing him and having no consequences for any of his actions?
Again, absolute power
right.
corrupts.
So yeah, it might take a while, but yeah, I can totally see that even the Superman that we see as the hero in all of the
just eventually starts.
Just how long until
getting used to getting his way,
dies a hero, or eventually is going to become a villain.
I absolutely agree, and well, I think we are kind of running a little bit short on time. I want to again thank you, Mark, Jeff, and Gabe, for joining me today. The Nerds Drink Whiskey. Is it a podcast? Video cast?
We're on YouTube if you want to watch it. We're on Facebook if you want to watch it. You can go to nerdsdrinkwhiskey.com if you want to watch it. If you want to listen to it, we are on iTunes. We are on Spotify. I believe we are on Anchor, just like you. And you can also, again, go to nerdsdrinkwhiskey.com, and there is just a plain audio version of it. So all those different platforms. Nerdsdrinkwhiskey.com is the place to find all the links for that. You can just go to nerdsdrinkwhiskey.com/listen if you want the audio version. The video versions are pretty much just YouTube and Facebook.
All right, and again, like I said, if you want to, I know we talked about villainy, we talked about the nature of villains, but there's no way we could have covered everything in this 1 hour time frame. But definitely, if you have a comment about what you've heard, or you want to talk to us, leave a message for us on the show, you can do that on our Anchor page, anchor.fm/Fuel Your Fandom. There's a method there where you can leave a message, and that gets directly to me. And also, if you feel like donating $1 or $2 here or there to become a sponsor of the show, it gives you the ability to do that there as well. But on behalf of Fuel Your Fandom, I want to thank the Nerds Drink Whiskey crew. And I want to thank you all for listening. And I just really want to remind everybody what I say at the end of every episode, because it bears repeating and it is absolutely true. Everything is fandom, and fandom is everything. Take care.